I'm Aryeh Lightstone. I'm from Denver, Colorado. Grew up in Denver. Went east for university. I went to Yeshiva University and then spent 2 years studying in Israel at a yeshiva called Sha'alvin. Then came back to Yeshiva University, graduated there with a degree in business, and after that, finished with a rabbinic degree from Yeshiva University. And I spent about a decade practicing as a rabbi, 2 years as an assistant rabbi in West Orange, New Jersey, and then about 8 years running a youth organization called NCSY across the New York area. After that, I did what all good rabbis should do. No offense, Rabbi Yafi. I got involved with real estate and politics. It's not true. All good rabbis should remain rabbis, is what they should be. But I was more of an entrepreneurial rabbi. And so got involved with real estate and politics. And I didn't get involved with politics because I care about politics. I got involved with politics because of the Iran deal. And I felt that the Iran deal was a betrayal, not only of our ally in Israel, but also a betrayal of American values. I was very moved by that. I ran a super PAC in 2014 and to support people who were against the Iran deal. And we succeeded in getting a Republican majority in the Senate, but we did not succeed in voting down the Iran deal. And so then I started working on a state-by-state target against the Iran deal, where I had many governors come up with sanctions and legislations themselves against the Iran deal. Anyways, the Iran deal wound up happening regardless of my efforts. And through coincidence and happenstance, Donald Trump wound up becoming the president of the United States of America, and he and I share one very good friend in common. The guy's name is David Friedman. And because of my experience in Washington, D.C., David sent me a note saying, hey, would I be interested in joining him for the confirmation process? If you're nominated as an ambassador, you have to receive the advice and consent of the Senate, which means the Senate needs to approve you. And that was fantastic. And I joined him for that. And in the process of joining him for that, really learned an enormous amount from him, his intelligence, his wit, and his diligence in trying to take this job extremely seriously. And when at the end of the confirmation process, he turned to me and he said that he asked the president if he can bring a second person with him on this journey. The president said yes, and Ambassador Friedman asked if my wife and myself and our 4 little kids would join him. And we moved to Ra'anana. And I served as his chief of staff for 4 years. Now, the culmination of those 4 years ended with the Abraham Accords, but there are several important ingredients that are necessary for that. And I want to just highlight them at the highest possible level and hopefully save time for questions. I'd rather speak about what's meaningfully interesting to you than that which is interesting to me. So how did we do this? And the reason why the title of the talk was called From the City of David to the Abraham Accords is really we took a different take on American foreign policy. American foreign policy towards Israel didn't start in 1948, but let's start it in 1948. May 14th, 1948 at 4 p.m., David Ben-Gurion declares a state of Israel. May 14th, 1948 at 4:11 p.m., Harry Truman, against the advice of all of his advisors, recognizes the state of Israel. Now, that was a momentous day, obviously, for the Jewish people and for the free world and for the United States of America. But already at that moment, at 4:11 p.m., when Harry Truman recognized Israel, it was a recognition, but it wasn't a full recognition. Truman did not recognize Israel's right to determine its own capital. It recognized its right to exist, but it said, we'll lean in and we'll be allies, but we're not going to be allies all the way. Now, just as an aside, I don't know if anybody knows why Ben-Gurion recognized the state of Israel on May 14th, 1948. Because it's Zoom, I'm just going to ask it rhetorically. If we were in person, we'd do hands and stuff like that. But it's a funny thing that the state was declared at 4 p.m. Israel time, 1948. The British mandate did not end until 12:01 a.m. on May 15th, which means I believe it's the only time in modern history that there were 2 countries in the same exact place at the same exact time for 8 hours. From 4 p.m. until midnight, there was both the state of Israel and mandatory Palestine. So the question is, why did Ben-Gurion do that? Obviously, he knew that the British mandate ended at 12:01 a.m. Why did he begin at 4 p.m.? So the answer is, I think, a profound answer. Ben-Gurion, who grew up on a kibbutz, lived on a kibbutz most of his life, that ate glat treif at the dinner dance that happened on Yom Kippur. not a committed devout Jew by any stretch of the imagination, understood in his kishkas that the state of Israel could not be founded on a Shabbat. May 15th at 12:01 a.m. was a Saturday morning. May 14th at 4 p.m. was Erev Shabbat, was before the Sabbath began. And Ben-Gurion went against all of international law and frankly any protocol, declaring two states in the same place at the same time, and said that the Jewish state that I am going to proclaim today will not start on Shabbat. It will start at the time where everybody who wants to participate can participate fully, which I mention that now because you read in the news and sometimes you feel on the street here in Israel a lot of tension in between right and left, center and up and down and sideways and religious and not and all of those things. That's true. We're Jews. We argue about a lot of things all the time. That's one of our specialties. But in the very DNA of this country was created somebody who was the furthest thing possibly from religious, understood that in the DNA of the country that the religious needed to be included in the founding of the country. And I would argue the exact opposite needs to be today. You have the most religious government that you've ever had. There needs to be a fundamental understanding that there are plenty of non-religious Jews in this country as well. And that's built into the DNA. And it gives me tremendous confidence that whatever the press tells you about the tensions and the everything else like that, at the very, very bottom line, at the very, very central DNA that keeps this country together, a lot more unites the people of Israel than divides the people of Israel. And I think you sitting where you are, I think should hopefully gain some solace and some confidence in that as well. So that started on May 14th, 1948, pardon me. 70 years later to the minute, we opened up our embassy in Jerusalem, May 14th, 2018 at 4:11 p.m. Why did we open up our embassy in Jerusalem 70 years to the minute after Harry Truman's recognition of the state of Israel? Because we wanted to correct the wrong. The Middle East for 70 years, literally all 70 years of our foreign policy had been a complicated policy. We support Israel. It's a democracy. We support Israel. We have shared values. We support Israel because it's the underdog. We support Israel because it's important because the Jewish vote or because the evangelical vote or whatever else it would be. We support Israel for whatever reason. But we don't support Israel all the way because it's not in our interest. Why? Because the oil and the three nose of Khartoum and we're going to ruin our relationships with the Arabs or with the Muslims or with whomever else it might be. And so therefore we were never all in. And whenever you're not fully in on something, what do you wind up doing? You create a vacuum. And where there's a vacuum, certainly in the Middle East, but anywhere else in the world, where there's a vacuum, you wind up with a lot of opportunities for troublemakers to make trouble. And that's exactly what happened over the course of 70 years. Nobody knew where America was exactly. And therefore, because we didn't know where we were exactly, there were lots of people who used that as a reason to create trouble. I'll just give you one vignette. How's that practical to you sitting where you are? Whether you support AIPAC or NORPAC or J, whatever you support, doesn't make a difference to me. If you support the U.S.-Israel relationship, you've likely run into a mayor or a governor or a member of Congress or Senate who says something that invariably sounds like Israel has a right to defend itself. Then we get very excited, we clap our hands because the congresswoman from Wyoming says that Israel has a right to defend itself, or the governor from Idaho says that Israel has a right to defend itself. I politely ask all of you not to take that as a compliment towards the state of Israel. It's not. Of course, Israel has a right to defend itself. Every single country in the world has a right to defend itself. By the fact that they get up and give a speech by saying that implies that somebody else can make the argument that Israel does not have a right to defend itself. That's ludicrous on its face. If America shot down a spy balloon last week, did you hear anybody give a speech saying that America has a right to protect itself from spy balloons from other countries? Of course not. That's a davar yadua. That is a known fact that you have the obligation to protect the sovereign territory of your country, certainly so in protecting your civilians. What I've tried to encourage members of Congress and other political leaders to say is Israel has a moral obligation to protect itself, to defend its citizens. It's not a right. Rights can be negotiable. Moral obligations are the DNA of what a country stands for. And Israel has a moral obligation to defend its citizens and to protect its borders, just like every country has a moral obligation to do so. So anyways, on May 14th, 2018 at 4:11 p.m., we corrected the wrong that happened with the U.S. foreign policy up until then, which says we'll be friendly with Israel, but up to a point. And at the opening of the embassy, and if you didn't watch it, you should go back and watch the recording. It was a very happy day. Fantastic speeches, tremendous enthusiasm in the air. I remember my wife and kids came on the bus from the bus terminal to get to the opening of the embassy. It was a highly secured event, a highly secured event. And so my wife and kids were riding with various different dignitaries on the bus, and the evangelicals were singing these songs, and the Jews were saying Tehillim, and the politicians were trying to collect checks, whatever it is that they do, right? This was a momentous occasion, and that my kids still, they were little kids at that point in time, still always remember the feeling. They didn't like the speeches, they were kids, but they remembered the absolute feeling to get that moment. So why do I mention all of this? I mention all of this for the following reason. The speech that was given at the opening of the embassy said, we didn't open our U.S. embassy in Jerusalem in order to impress the Israelis. The Israelis know where their capital is, right? We didn't open up our U.S. embassy in Jerusalem to tell America where we believe the capital is. America, since 1995, knew where the capital was, based on the Jerusalem Embassy Act passed by Congress in 1995. We open up our embassy here to send a message to Tehran, the capital of Iran. We open up our embassy there to send a message to Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia. We open up our embassy in Jerusalem to send a message to Rabat, the capital of Morocco. And the point of all of this is how do you develop a relationship with a country and demonstrate a true alliance? By standing closer with them. Ultimately, it's the concept of peace through strength. The closer we stood with Israel, the more robust, whether it was the recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, whether it was moving our embassy to Jerusalem, whether it was recognizing Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights, whether it was removing the concept of occupied territories from a statement, whether it was moral equivalency with terrorism, we removed all of those things and we stood shoulder to shoulder with Israel and said, let's see what winds up happening. And do you know what wound up happening? Peace wound up happening. And peace wound up happening for the following reasons. Number one is, you should know as Americans, every single capital in the world cares the most about what the United States of America feels towards it. It's not about the dollars that we send, although that matters. It's not about our military, although that matters. The United States of America carries, whether it's willingly or not, the leadership of the entire world. And therefore, it matters dearly to every country in the world what is the United States of America's feeling towards that country. That is their foreign policy. For many countries, their entire foreign policy is, what does the United States of America feel about us? Us in the United States don't always feel that power, but we have that power and we have to exercise that power importantly. So much so in the Middle East, where the Middle East is a very complicated place. The strength of the United States of America is every country's number one superpower. And therefore, as soon as we demonstrated that the road to Washington, D.C. goes through Jerusalem, goes through the city of David, do you know who noticed that? The United Arab Emirates. Do you know who noticed that? The Kingdom of Bahrain. Do you know who noticed that? Go on and on. The Sudan, Kosovo, and ultimately Morocco all came to say, if I want a closer relationship with the United States of America, the best way to do that is to stand with its number one ally in the region, which is Israel. And that was turning U.S. foreign policy on its head. What had we done up until then? We said the more distance we show, if we're a fair negotiator at the table with Israel, then the other countries will become closer to us. That's not at all true. Every time we were equivocating vis-a-vis Israel, the other countries didn't know where we stood in the region. The second we were strong, we stood against Iran, we stood against Islamic terror, we stood with our ally Israel. Suddenly the map of the Middle East became clear. You're either on the side of good and virtue and value, or you're not. And the countries that chose to be on the side of good and virtue and value, led by the United Arab Emirates, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, followed by King Hamad of Bahrain, followed by Sudan, and then Kosovo, and ultimately Morocco. And I tell you, if we had 6 more months, there would have been 8 or 9 more countries that would have joined as well. Because when you're able to show the map of this is what happens when we lean towards peace, that's an absolutely fantastic result. And most countries would rather lean towards peace than lean away towards peace. Let me give you 2 vignettes on that, because I think it matters. I flew on a secret mission with one of the head of the Mossad from the Prime Minister's office to negotiate our peace arrangement with Sudan. And we landed on a Turkish plane in the Sudanese airport. The only other airplanes that were not part of the Sudanese Air Force when we landed in Khartoum was the Iranian national airline and the Syrian national airline. It was fairly clear that I was not in friendly territory when I landed there. We were brought to the president's palace to negotiate the peace agreement in between Sudan and Israel, and we were negotiating. We went back and forth for 8 or 9 hours on this negotiation, and finally, at the conclusion, the Sudanese came out and said, look, we'll agree to all of your points but 3. And one of those 3 points was we won't agree to peace with Israel. We'll agree to non-belligerence with Israel, which means we'll end our state of war with Israel, but we won't have peace with Israel. And several of our guys around the table were sitting there thinking, okay, this isn't bad. We'll get most of what we came here for, and let's walk away with this piece of paper. And as our guys were sort of nodding, this is okay, this is a reasonable thing, I turned to the Sudanese and I said very respectfully, I care deeply for the people of Sudan because I care deeply for all of humanity. You have 40 million people here. And to me, it would be much better if they had a better future than a worse future. So I care about that. But let's be extremely honest about why I'm sitting here. I'm sitting here because Israel is our ally in the region, and making peace with Israel is good for the United States and good for the state of Israel. That's why I'm sitting here. Really, it's the entire reason why the US government sent the resources to send me here to Sudan. I'm not here for any other reason. We have lots of other resources, and if we thought they were necessary, we would have spent them here. They're not. You're not our ally. You're not even our friend. You're having a discussion about what it will take to eventually be our friend. We don't begin these conversations by having an asterisk saying we can sort of be friends with Israel. Israel is the answer to the problem in the regions. It is not the problem in the region. And until that becomes a basic understanding of your philosophy, the United States of America doesn't have to do anything else with you. And I stood up and I started to walk towards our car to get on our plane and to fly home. It took them maybe 3.5 seconds to catch up with me and said, we didn't realize you saw things that way. Let's talk. And 17 minutes later, they came back with a peace agreement, which was identical to the piece of paper that I handed them that morning. It's purely a question of where we choose to put our leverage and how we want to deliver that in that specific sense. So that was in the case of Sudan. In the case of we can go through sort of all of the things. I'll give you one other I think super interesting vignette. At the end of January, or towards the end of us resigning from our positions, because President Trump lost the election, his last day was January 20th. So all of our last days was January 20th as well. So in the teens of January, we got a call from another country who said, we're willing to do direct flights and tourist visas with the country of Israel. Is that something of interest? So I was very excited. Anybody who was willing to talk to us in the teens of January and to go ahead and push the Abraham Accords a little bit more forward would have been spectacular. That would have been very exciting. So I called my friends in the UAE and said, look, we only had this relationship because of you. Is this something that's interesting to you? And the response that I got back from the UAE was very clear. I didn't know that you were okay with half anti-Semites. And I turned to them and I said, what do you mean? Says, they don't want to recognize Israel and you're still willing to go ahead and let them be part of this? What does that mean? It's not possible. Said you recognize Israel, and that's the difference, as the rabbi described in the beginning. Israel had peace with Jordan. Israel had peace with Egypt, but it was a cold peace. There was an agreement not to shoot at each other. You don't change the region. You don't change the future. You don't change the kids of the region just by saying we're not going to shoot at each other. You change the entire region by saying we're going to work towards something new and something better and something more exciting. And that's the last 2 things I want to close with before we get to questions. On January 19th, the last night I had my job, I hosted a Zoom similar to this with women leaders from the Abraham Accord countries and those who want to participate in the Abraham Accords. Why did I do that specifically with women leadership? Because culturally, amongst all the Abraham Accord countries, it is a very different experience as a woman than it is as a man. It's different enough as a man. It is very different as a woman. And I thought if I put together a women's leadership council, they'd be able to lean on each other. How do you dress? Do you shake hands? What do you eat? Where do you go? Are you escorted? Are you not? Et cetera, et cetera. So I created a council. I had my first lady who spoke was sitting in San Francisco, my next in Denver, my third in Detroit, my fourth in Florida. Those were my women from the United States of America. Then we went in geographic order. We had somebody sitting in Morocco, and then in Sudan, and then in UAE, and then Bahrain, and then 5 in Israel, and ultimately concluding with somebody in Uzbekistan. I had 17 different time zones covered over the course of the participation of this call. And each woman who got on the call was talking about their enthusiasm about what the future will bring. And that to me was incredibly heartening. Fast forward to 5.5 weeks ago, I was in Saudi Arabia with Safra Katz. Safra Katz is the CEO of Oracle. It's a pretty big company. And I had brought her there to sort of experience what Saudi Arabia is like. I'm a big fan of Saudi Arabia these days. I think it's very exciting. I'll tell you why in a moment. And I arranged for her a dinner that honored her and her leadership as the highest paid female executive in the world. And she was honored at Princess Noura University, which is the largest women's university in the world, in Riyadh, in Saudi Arabia. And there were 250 women in Saudi Arabia as part of the next cohort of women leaders of Saudi Arabia. And Safra Katz stands up and says the following thing: as a Jewish girl born in Rehovot, Israel, a devout Zionist, and leader of an American technology company, the odds of me sitting in front of 250 Saudi women, telling them about how they will be the future leaders of the Middle East, was a highly unlikely event, to say the least. And she closed, and the women of Saudi Arabia stood up and didn't clap. They stood up, and a standing ovation like you could not imagine. And the line to hug Safra at the conclusion of the event was literally around the square that we had this event in. Proud of her Jewish heritage, proud of her support of the state of Israel, proud of who she is as a female tech entrepreneur and leader, and sitting there in Saudi speaking to these women, talking to them as equals, and people will have a equal opportunity to shape the region. That's extremely, extremely exciting. I envision, and with this I really will close, I envision a world, right? This is Israel at 75 this year. We're celebrating 75 years of the state of Israel. I envision Israel at 80 or no later than 85. So within the next 5 to 10 years, you'll be able to fly El Al and land at Ben Gurion Airport and immediately get on a high-speed train that can take you through Amman, Jordan, through Riyadh and Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, bring you to Bahrain and Qatar, and Abu Dhabi and Dubai, all without having to put out your passport, all without having to change currency. I don't know what currencies we'll be using at that point in time, and all without having to explain why you do or do not have a passport stamped Israel, because you'll be sitting there with Emiratis traveling one way, Bahrainis traveling another way, Saudis traveling another way, and you'll be sitting in what I think is going to be the most exciting region in the world at that point in time, a region filled with peace and prosperity. And all of that started on August 13th, 2020 at 10 a.m. when we hosted the phone call from the White House, from the Oval Office. President Trump hosted a conference call in between Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, the leader of the United Arab Emirates, Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu, the Prime Minister then and now again of Israel, and began a conversation that went just as follows. Mohammed bin Zayed said, 2020 was a year where bad things happened to us and we were forced to react. History will not remember 2020 that way. History will remember 2020 as the year that we decided that the past will not dictate the future and our region will not be one of chaos and concern, but will be one of peace and prosperity. And it begins with this phone call. And that was true. I was privileged to be in the Oval Office during that phone call. I was privileged to be on the first flight from here. I'll turn off blur for one moment so you can see it. Hang on. You can see that's the award that I got for the president from the Abraham Accords. That is all the first flights that we took, all the menus that were on the first flights. Down there is actually the tickets from all the first flights, the first one to UAE, the first one to Bahrain, the first one to Morocco, to Sudan, to Kosovo, all of those flights. And today, we're concluding about 2 years of the Abraham Accords. Over 600,000 tourists have traveled in between these countries, representing tens of billions of dollars of commerce exchanged in between the two. Over 250 MOUs have been signed amongst these 5 countries, and peace is truly breaking out in the Middle East. I promised to conclude 3 times. I will just tell you, growing up, my parents said that you will never be a brain surgeon or solve peace in the Middle East. And my response is 1 out of 2 is not bad. So we're progressing in the right direction. And I'm optimistic that you will come and join me in this exciting adventure. Oh, I said I was going to conclude now 11 times. I always conclude with this message. All of you have the ability, please God, to be able to come to Israel. If you have not been since COVID, please come. please come and visit, stand with Israel. There's nothing that matters more to Israel than people like you coming here. But add on a trip to Morocco or to Abu Dhabi or to Dubai or to Bahrain. And when you stay in your hotel, say, I'm here because of the Abraham Accords. When you get in your cab, I'm here because of the Abraham Accords. When you board Emirates Airline or Etihad Airline, I'm here because of the Abraham Accords. Say it over and over and over and over again. If we demonstrate that peace pays, then more countries will join. If we demonstrate that there is no peace dividend, then God forbid we go back to a region that looks like Jordan and Egypt, which is not the region that any of us want the state of Israel to be a part of. We're looking for it to be part of the warmth and the creativity and the excitement of the Abraham Accords. I'm sorry, that I was late. It requires nurturing and treasuring, but as you can tell, I'm very excited about this topic and happy to answer any questions that the rabbi throws my way.
That's great.
Okay, Rabbi, it's up to you. You're muted. Rabbi, you're muted.
Okay, I got it. Thank you, Erwin. Thank you, Aryeh. It's a very. I think that this is just the beginning of a discussion, and we had mentioned at the very beginning of this talk that there was some questions as to when you lost your job and the former administration became the new administration. How did you continue to be involved, and what is your position? Do you have an official position, and how is it that you are still involved when you have to be late because you got a Zoom call from two representatives of the Arab nations? So
right. So
how did you continue your and who are you now?
So I had hoped dearly that the Abraham Accords was going to be bipartisan. Not only did I hope dearly that that was going to be the case, I believe that the countries all thought that making peace with Israel was going to be a winner, both amongst Republicans and Democrats. And the answer is it is. Unfortunately, though, what trumps, pardon the pun, something being bipartisan is if it was done by the previous president, it must have been bad. And that was the policy in general that the new president brought in. And just so people know, I pray for President Biden to be the single greatest president of my lifetime and of my kids' lifetime. That's good for America. It would be fantastic. So far, I haven't seen it vis-a-vis the Abraham Accords because this would have been an easy thing for him to get up at his inauguration and to say Trump was wrong about everything, but he was right about Iran and he was right about the Abraham Accords. And had he been able to do that, or had he done that, there would be other countries that would have signed on today already. He didn't do that, unfortunately, and that's a shame for America. It's a shame for the region, but it's really a shame for America. So what wound up happening, the administration, if you look back in May 13th of 2021, Ned Price, who was the spokesman for the State Department, was asked by Matt Lee. This is why I wrote my book. I saw this press conference and I immediately sat down to write my book. He was asked by Matt Lee, who's a reporter for the AP, not a right winger by any stretch of the imagination, what do you call the agreements that were signed under the previous administration? And go Google this interaction. It's comical if it wasn't like actual real life. And Ned Price would not use the words Abraham Accords. He wouldn't even call them peace agreements. He wouldn't even say that they were valued. The first time that the word Abraham Accords came out of a senior member of the administration while they were in office came the day after the Afghanistan withdrawal in August of 2021. But there's no Abraham Accord team in the Biden administration. They say a lot of things. And again, I'm praying for their success. I've recommended to people who say they're close there of how to do this, but it hasn't been. You really have to do.
Aryeh,
Yeah.
I asked about you. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
How are you continuing to be involved? And how did you continue after you lost your job? And
yes.
And
what
is your position?
Two cell phones, or actually 3 cell phones. All the countries that called me on January 20th called me on January 21st because they didn't have anybody else to call. And I sent them back to the embassies to say, speak to them about this or speak to them about that, because you're not allowed to, and you should not. I'll be very clear about this. Explain to any other country the position of the United States of America when you're out of office. That is not your position. There's an election, a president was chosen, and he or she can choose their teams. But because Israel has elections every third or fourth day, and because that's a little bit complicated for these other countries, and the US government was not playing the role of matchmaker anymore, these countries would call me and others frequently about, wait, there's a new foreign minister, there's a new president, there's a new prime minister. And because all of those things were happening, we just kept getting phone calls, and we kept trying to help, which was, speak to this person, resolve that issue. There's a visa issue. There was an Israeli who was arrested in Dubai for doing something. The Israelis wanted to figure out how to speak appropriately to the Emirati police about that circumstance. Under normal cases, this would have been an advanced, mature relationship. They're brand new relationships, and we know both sides very well. So we were able to help negotiate what that would look like. And there were plenty of Israeli politicians who were part of the last new government who didn't know anything about the Abraham Accords, who called and said, who do we speak to? How do we help? What do we do? And because we're there and we pick up the phone, we're there. So Jared Kushner and I and a couple others developed an institute called the Abraham Accord Institute for Peace. We hired somebody who worked under the previous administration to run it. And we've got 6 people who sort of serve as the help desk of the Abraham Accords, but people like Jared or Avi or myself, Miguel, other people who were part of the thing, get phone calls, and we're here to help as best as we possibly can. People work through various different issues and see different opportunities.
Do you have any relationship with the Biden administration?
They have my phone number.
Okay. I do have, I sent you this question that came actually before today, and I'm going to read it exactly as it was sent. This comes from a member of our congregation. Some people feel that the U.S. rationale for the Accords was for Donald Trump to gain Jewish support. The rewards to the Arab signatories were in fact bribes that in some instances comprised U.S. foreign policy. For example, U.S. recognition of Moroccan control over Western Sahara, U.S. sale of advanced weapons like Reaper drones and aircraft to the UAE in a region already dangerously weaponized, removal of Sudan from the U.S. list of state sponsors of terrorism. And the question also remains that if a more pacific government were to arise in Iran, God help us if that would ever happen, okay? That's my commentary. Would current and potential signers to the Accords reverse their positions? It's a very deep and perhaps more than one question, but a lot of
Sure.
issues, and perhaps you could respond to some or all.
Sure. It's a meaningful question. To think that there was political calculus in the Abraham Accords in terms of securing votes, there was none. There's also no Jewish vote that historically has mattered for the Republicans for quite a while. So that's a misnomer. In terms of, is it the right thing for the region or is it the wrong thing for the region? We can go through piece by piece. Sudan, for example, desperately needed to reform its ways, and they checked every box and some in order to be able to get there. By being on our terror watch list, it was a guarantee that they were never going to be able to support their people. And so this was I don't want to say a no-brainer, but they had done much more than we had asked them in order to be able to get off the terror financing list. And if you just look at sort of a restructuring, they're not pleasant by any stretch of the imagination, but all of their leadership that had turned them into who they were not there any longer. And so if we were going to give a fresh chance to somebody, we would give it to this leadership. The recognition of the Western Sahara, you can study that issue and come out on either side of that issue. To me, it was very clear that one side is really a terror regime, the Polisario, and the other side is our oldest ally in history is Morocco. And I was comfortable with that. That was ultimately the president's decision on that. In terms of weaponry for the Middle East, the best way I could possibly describe that is the more countries that are on the side of the United States of America. The UAE has fought with us in every engagement that we've had since 9/11. For us to have a moratorium on sales that they would use only in defensive component for them is against our interest, is against their interest. I think it's against the interest of stability in the Middle East. And finally, regarding Iran, if Iran comes around and the Cyrus Accords is what I like to call it. If Iran shows up and says, hey, peace in the Middle East is a pretty cool thing, I want to jump on board, every single country would embrace that meaningfully. Not a single country would walk away from Israel. Again, the policy of the United States of America is Israel's not the problem in the region, Israel's the solution. And the more we stand with Israel being the solution for the region, the more other countries will come around to see that. Saudi sees it. They really, really do. Saudi will get there. Other countries will get there. I hope to God one day Iran gets there. I don't know who prays here and prays meaningfully, but if you watch the girls and mostly the young women in Iran today, and you want to see bravery, that's bravery. And that is bravery to pray for their success. They're risking their lives meaningfully for a better future for them and for their sisters and for their mothers and for their daughters. I'd like to show it to some of the people on our college campuses who look for safe spaces and show them what real sacrifice and commitment for a real future is like. I'm in awe. I'm in awe. My Shmona Esrei, the way I pray every day is longer, praying for the sake of these Muslim women who live in Iran. I think that they are heroes. And the fact that they weren't recognized meaningfully at the State of the Union by either president at any point in time in the response. I still remember as a child watching that guy stand in front of the tank in Tiananmen Square. And that person was I don't know the person's name. I don't know any more about the bio. I was 6 years old, I think, at the time. But that memory is etched in my mind. I've tried to show my children what heroism looks like by looking at these Iranian protesters. Just my take.
Thank you, Ari. Could you mention again, and so we could all hear it, the group that you formed with Jared Kushner? It's called the...
Sure. The Abraham Accord Institute for Peace, or Peace Institute. It's one of those two. I'll send it.
Abraham Accord Peace Institute.
Yeah.
And you held up two phones.
Yeah.
You know, I said that's how you have maintained the relationship between the leaders of the Arab nations and what was going on. So I guess my question is, does this group that you this I don't know if you call it a business or
it's a not-for-profit. It's a 501c3.
Not-for-profit. Does it? Do you have you gotten a call from Biden or anybody in the administration, or from Netanyahu and anybody in the Israeli government? Do you have any kind of interaction with the leadership of both countries, or are you doing this on your own?
No, the United States of America hasn't called me, but the Senate has an Abraham Accord caucus. The Congress has an Abraham Accord caucus, and they meet regularly with this institute. They just came to Israel on a caucus trip maybe 3 weeks ago with a schedule mostly worked out with this institute, and then they flew to Bahrain and UAE and Morocco, mostly with the guiding and the coaching of this institute as it goes. So meaning that there is meaningful connectivity. The institute was just in Israel last week. I was not in Israel last week, and met with the Prime Minister, the Foreign Minister, the Interior Minister, the Energy Minister, the Environment Minister, the Tourism Minister, and I think two other ministers that I've Finance Minister, pardon me, and the Minister of Commerce, and they came there, and they'll do the same trip with the same parties in UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan. I don't know if they go to Kosovo frequently or not. I'd have to check. But there is enormous interactivity because as Moses said, "Vayifen chova chova yar ki ein ish," they looked around and they saw that nobody else was there. So somebody else is just doing sort of the basic bricks and mortars that are required to maintain and develop the relationship. I sit there in a passive advisory role. Somebody calls, I'm happy to help. but they're a 501c3 like any other sort of think tank in Washington, D.C., doing the role of supporting and championing and highlighting the challenges of the Abraham Accord countries.
So this is based in America?
The home offices are in Washington, D.C. Yeah.
In Washington. And a question was raised, was the congressional delegation that you just mentioned that went to all
Very
these
bipartisan.
places.
Very
Was
bipartisan. Yeah, five Democrats and 4 Republicans.
Okay. And another question that's come in, it's a little on a different plane. Have you considered speaking to U.S. college campuses to help deflect anti-Israel sentiment? Is that on your agenda?
If I had more time, or if I had a better platform to be able to do it, I think about our kids on college campus every single day. It's a hard place to be, and if I could be of help to them, I'm happy to go be of help to them. It's an embarrassment to the Jewish community, an embarrassment to the supporters of Israel community, that they had that march at the University of Michigan, however many months ago, where they marched through from the river to the sea, et cetera, and they've come back with an even stronger march and an even worse speaker now this week, and nobody did anything, because at the end of the day, we get a concern, we share Facebook things and everything else like that, but for us to do something, I don't know who on this screen got out there and wrote their checks. I don't know who did. I don't know who went and said, I'm going to University of Michigan. I don't know who looked at their board of directors and called and said, this is unacceptable and inappropriate. I don't know the answer to that. But if we didn't do that, we didn't do enough. And there are college kids there who feel threatened. And we're supposed to stand up for them, because we're adults who have done well and been paid back by this country.
I see Eva's raising her hand. Would you like to ask? Because I was going to ask your question, but go ahead. Wait, I lost you.
You mentioned that you are still continuing through your new little organization the promotion of the Abraham Accords and extending them and so on. I'm wondering if the president and Blinken, are on board with what you and this bipartisan group from Congress is trying to do. Are they promoting it? Are they leading it? What is the future of the Abraham Accords given what the president wants or doesn't want?
I can't tell you what Blinken or Secretary Blinken or President Biden are thinking. I don't know. They really do have my number, and they have the ability to get in touch with me or anybody else who's helps with the Accords. They say a lot of really positive things. Since the Afghanistan withdrawal, they've said a lot of really positive things, but you can oftentimes tell what people's focus is based upon the time and the money that they spend on something. I ran something called the Abraham Fund, which was U.S. taxpayer dollars to invest, not to donate, to be able to support peace in the region. They canceled the job and they took away the money. There was an office of the special envoy for the Abraham Accords. That position doesn't exist anymore. The person who is running the Abraham Accords for the State Department, put it this way, it would be easier for me to have a conversation with Blinken, with Secretary of State Blinken or National Security Advisor Sullivan or President Biden than it would be for him, based upon where he is currently stationed in the State Department. He's a really good guy. He was on our team. So again, they say really good things. I hope that they'll change their mind. This is a good diplomatic win for them. It's good for our allies. It's good for the region. It's good for our country. And I really, really hope that they get 7 more countries. It'll be fantastic. It really would be wonderful. I just don't see it happening right now. And I think you see political wins again playing with this. I think you see, right, President Trump has already announced. I think the rumor is Nikki Haley's going to announce this coming week. And I think you'll see a lot of other countries sort of sit there and say, maybe the Republicans will be more excited about the Abraham Accords. Maybe I'll wait to see who winds up winning. I think that would be a bad thing. I think one of the best things about our administration is we try not to calculate politics when there was something good to do. Peace is good. It's not a Republican thing. It's not a Democratic thing. It's not even an American thing. It's a good thing for mankind or people kind. But here the U.S. can and should lead on this. That would be my take. I just don't think it'll happen.
Thank you, Eva. Who, the congressional, the people that did what they did, who is behind that? Who made that happen?
Who made the congressional caucus get involved?
Yes,
So I don't know whether it was inspired by our institute or it was inspired by Israel has an Abraham Accord caucus in the Knesset. England in the parliament there, I believe, has an Abraham Accord caucus. I believe the French parliament also has an Abraham Accord caucus. It sort of became a thing that right or left, it's something that people want support of Israel to be bipartisan, whatever institute you're in. I think the Abraham Accord caucus actually won the highest percentage of votes of anything ever in the Knesset that was actually voted on. I don't want to say anything ever. I think in the last 5 elections, I think it had 93% approval or something like that. And that doesn't matter, right, left, center, et cetera, et cetera. That's a positive thing. In the U.S. Congress also, it's pretty popular. And I think distance away from the Trump administration will make it even more popular. Once this Abraham Accord caucus traveled, and it was their first trip that they've ever done, I'm positive that there will be other trips that will happen, and that's how Congress develops sort of a rhythm. That somebody does it once, the first time is hard, and then people do it many times after that. And I'm optimistic that the caucus of 9 people will grow to 19 people. There's almost nobody against the Abraham Accords in Congress, to the best of my knowledge, and it'll grow. I think it'll grow. But again, going back to what we said, the very first State of the Union after the Abraham Accords was President Biden's very first State of the Union. Had I been President Biden, which obviously I'm not, I would have had the ambassador from each of the countries standing in the galley, and I would have congratulated them for making peace. This is in any other circumstance. When do we not call out peacemakers? I understand they didn't win the Nobel Prize because of President Trump was affiliated with it, but how do we as Americans not recognize the other leaders for making peace with Israel? That to me is a shame for us. And by the way, all those countries were astonished that this did not win them wide accord amongst all of the U.S. population. That's disappointing to us. It really is, because standing with Israel, if that becomes a political decision, we're not going to see this Middle East that we've always dreamt about. It shouldn't be political. It shouldn't be Republican. It shouldn't be Democrat. Peace should be a good thing. It really should be. That's literally why I wrote the book, Let My People Know. None of you have heard of me before this call. None of you will remember me after this call. And that was the reason why I wrote the book. On a policy basis, peace should win. It really should. And I see some of the questions in the chat. How involved was this person? How involved was that person? Not at all relevant. I mean, history, read Jared's book, he'll tell you what he did, and Friedman's book, he'll tell you what I did. My book will tell you what everybody did, but not anything that I did, because I didn't do anything that mattered all that much. I just had a chance to sit there and watch it happen, which was fantastic. This will, again, if it succeeds, imagine a world where I told you Israel at 80 or 85, where you get on that plane and then you take that train. And imagine what that does for our manufacturers. Imagine what that does for our military. Imagine what that does for our geopolitical threat in China, being able to have a solid region that's safe and protected, that has unlimited energy, unlimited real estate, unlimited manpower, unlimited access to ports, the things that matter to us. If we want to compete with China, the answer is the Abraham Accords. If we don't want to compete with China, so let's just fight with each other as Republicans and Democrats and forget about America.
Thank you, Aryeh. Just one last piece of clarification. And that's, you mentioned these caucuses all over the world, you know,
Yeah.
that each of these governments have a Abraham Accords caucus, okay?
Yes.
But what's most important to me is the one here in America. You know, I don't know enough about the government system, but I'd like to know, you know, how does a caucus like that get created, and who does it answer to, and is it something that's part of, you know, the I don't know, the workings of Congress? You know, do they have to report to anybody?
No.
And how does someone form? You said that the Knesset, you know, 93%, you know, approve of this concept. Very nice, but But how does
And
it here in
and the-
America? How does it
and-
happen?
In the Knesset, you need a budget. So that's why it needs to get voted on to be an official caucus. I don't
Okay.
believe in the US Senate or Congress it needs, because I don't think it has a budget. I think they work within the budget of the Senate or the House. They I believe, selected themselves. The two co-chairs are Senator Lankford from Oklahoma and Senator Rosen from Nevada. Two people who've been outspoken against anti-Semitism. Rosen's a Democrat, Lankford's a Republican. Extremely pro-Israel, extremely rational, nice people. They like working together. So this was a logical place that they wanted to get involved and to do this. I don't know the inner mechanics of how they set up the caucus, but once they've got a caucus, this is how all of government works, to the best of my knowledge. The person who makes the most noise winds up getting what they want. And what I mean by that is you have 100 senators who, we've got a very big world that we have a foreign policy that we're in charge of, because we have to have a foreign policy regarding everything. So this group will become the experts on the Abraham Accords, which means whether it's Blinken or whoever the next Secretary of State is, or whoever the next director of the Middle East is for the CIA, or whoever else it will hopefully go to this group for knowledge, for connectivity, for guidance, and for steering, and hopefully vice versa. They'll go to that group and be able to say, we've got three co-equal branches, at least
So
according to the
who
Constitution.
decides that they have a budget and how much it is?
I believe that I believe now I'm speaking out, maybe I should have paid more attention in 10th grade civics, but I believe that once they form a caucus with whatever thing they need to do to fill the caucus, they can perform any foreign policy activity that the leader of the Senate or the leader of the House sign off on. So I think that determines the traveling budget. You're allowed to do a CODEL, which is an official congressional delegation, or a NODEL, which is a non-official. AIPAC brings people on NODELs. Senators and Congress people send themselves on CODELs, and the two are independent with how that works. This was a CODEL, which means somebody signed off on a 5-country visit to emphasize the value of having a bipartisan visit to the Abraham Accord countries.
Okay, thank you very much. I've been watching the chat. I think we asked all of the questions that were put into the chat, and I want to thank you, Aryeh, for bringing a lot of very important information and insight, and perhaps is your book is available?
I saw it was posted by El Presidente in the chat, so go buy it. Go buy lots of copies.
I saw there was something posted. I didn't know what that was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a link to
Oh, that's a
Amazon.
link for the book.
Yeah. Valentine's Day is around the corner. Super Bowl Sunday is a day that people give their grandkids books if they want them. There's never a shortage of time to give my book to people.
Very good. Okay. I'm gonna take off our highlights and just have a hold on. Wait a minute. Hold on a second. Don't go. Okay. How come? Oh, I want to put it in gallery view. Okay. I just want to, I'm taking a look at everybody here, and I hope this was a beginning of a discussion within our community. Let me give a shout out for the Monday and Wednesday Lunch and Learn that is put together by our cantor. That is each Monday and Wednesday on Zoom from 12:30 to 1:30. It's a wonderful opportunity to discuss things like this and a whole bunch of other things. And just to make sure that Israel is on our agenda. As American Jews, we must understand that we just need to remember, when Israel was not on the map, we know what happened. And we need Israel as much as the Israelis need Israel. And if we can promote peace in the region through something like the Abraham Accords, I think we should do everything that we can to make sure that that continues to happen. I want to
Rabbi,
yes, go ahead.
I just saw that Ken had asked a question about where does AIPAC stand with the Abraham Accords?
Oh, that just came in after we were.
Right.
Okay.
Happy to answer that, and I'm
Okay.
going to sign off because I have to run. I apologize.
Okay. Can we have that the final question, Aryeh?
AIPAC has done an excellent job on promoting the Abraham Accords. Almost every Jewish organization and pro-Israel organizations wrap their arms around this meaningfully. J Street, I think, is the one exception that's come out against it. Look, I can't echo the rabbi's words enough. Come support it and be here. Vote with your feet. It's a great opportunity to go on vacation to Dubai and tell people you're supporting Israel. This is great. Go to Morocco. Do these things and then bring friends and tell other friends, because that will generate peace. Saudi Arabia will make peace with Israel for the following reason. It doesn't matter who's in the U.S. administration. There are 7 flights that fly from Israel to UAE every single day. Every business class seat is sold every single day. When we're competing for business and opportunity, believe me, the Saudis know that. This is an opportunity to be able to show tremendous success and excitement. So hopefully you'll join me in that. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Aryeh. Let's end with a prayer. Shalom Yomav, Hu Ya'aseh Shalom, Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imeru. Everyone, Amen.